today I want to talk about my day again, and then I want to end up talking about narrative theory, going over the basics, and then also talking about Jews and how Jews are masters of narrative, and that they actually invert narrative. So we'll get there. Alright, so today I felt pretty sick actually. I did not feel good this morning, most of the day, and I just kind of like laid down a lot. I have like a heated thing underneath my back. It's really helpful because I have a sore back. I have a herniated disc in my lower back, which is getting better slowly, but yeah, so I just laid around most of the day. And then I watched YouTube, and I was watching like some trash YouTube as well. Kind of really couldn't think very well today. I did read the Bible a bit, and I also I did my cold plunge in the morning. I did meditate in the morning. I prayed. I did stretches for my back, and then my cold plunge is broken again, so I ordered another cold plunge. This is like the third one I've ordered, and I'm kind of getting annoyed because they keep getting leaks. This one I ordered is like a really cheap, like $29 one, the new one that I just ordered, like super Chinese one, because it's like got like Chinese lettering on the outside. But the reviews were good and it was very cheap, so I will order it. It's a smaller one. The other ones I had were like 103 gallon. This one's like 76 gallon. But there was a picture of a guy using it, and he was like in there, but he was like really scrunched up, so I figured I could do it too. But yeah, the cold tub's been really annoying, honestly, to get it functional and be able to use it continuously. It's been hard to do. And then I got a new air filter in the mail today, and for my air purifier, and I took out the old filter. And it was completely caked with like dust and stuff, and so I had to take that out and change it. And I tried to put in the new one, but it's like a generic one that I got, and it wasn't turning on. And so I had to like investigate. There's like a little safety switch the generic one doesn't hit, only the brand name one would get. And so I just put some tape over the safety switch, and it works. Yeah, and tomorrow I should be getting my red light for red light therapy. I'm looking forward to that because red light therapy is supposed to be good for depression and anxiety, I saw from one study. And I specifically ordered the red light that has the wavelength 810 nanometers, which they used in the study. So looking forward to trying that tomorrow. And tomorrow is the 7th. So not tomorrow, but on the 8th, I should get my EMF canopy, which I'm also looking forward to block electromagnetic frequencies. And I wanted to say thank you to my commenter. Specifically, I'm getting nice comments from one person who is saying that they told me to keep it up, and that my videos feel relatable, and that it's like a chill space. And I really appreciated all the support. And I think they also said that it was, brave that I was talking about all this stuff. And I appreciate that very much. So thank you to my commenter. And then, so I felt pretty crummy all day. And I just tried to get through the day. It was just kind of like trying to basically get through the day. If the day is really not feeling good, then I just try and get through it, and not make it worse as well. But I was really craving something, and I ate pretty healthy today, but then I thought, well, I could maybe I could go to Wendy's because there's a deal on the DoorDash app or the Uber Eats app, one of the two, for like a buy one get one free. So for chicken nuggets. So I went there and I did get that, and also I got a salad along with it, and it was good. They gave me a lot of dips in the bag. They gave me like one of each dip. That was great. And while I was eating it, I was listening to Jake Shields. He's like he's got like the Fight Back podcast, and it's basically he talks about Jews a lot. So I appreciate that, actually. And I was listening to one of his latest ones where he interviewed somebody, I forget the name, but it was kind of like a Mexican or a Hispanic last name. And this guy was talking about the Talmud. And that's been kind of like a focus of mine somewhat lately. And specifically, I look at it and think about it from a narrative perspective, because that's kind of how I think about almost everything. And I'm going to talk about that now. So, now we're going to get into narrative theory. Okay, so what is narrative theory? So, that is a theory by a man named Walter Fisher. And he says that it's there's sort of two paradigms. He contrasts the two. There's what he calls the narrative paradigm, so that's what he proposes. And then there's also the rational world paradigm, which he says is kind of the default. And the narrative paradigm just kind of says that everything is like a story, more or less. That we think of things, we understand things in terms of a story. Okay, so I'll talk about the contrast here. So under the rational world paradigm, we'll start there. So that's more like the default one, something that a lot of people really have. Not everybody, but this is the one that's kind of the default. And it has 5 different points contrasted with 5 points from the narrative paradigm. So the rational world paradigm says that 1, humans are rational. 2, decision making is based on arguments. 3, arguments adhere to specific criteria for soundness and logic. 4, rationality is based on the quality of evidence and formal reasoning processes. And 5, the world can be understood as a series of logical relationships that are uncovered through reasoning. So a lot of people kind of have this sort of idea or outlook on things. And I hear this a lot from people too, where they leave things like a ... or they say, well, we just don't know yet, if we found out more, maybe we would know. The answers are out there. I don't have them right now, or maybe science doesn't have them right now. We just don't have it right now. So the comparison is to the narrative paradigm. And it's got 5 points as well. And the first one is 1, humans are storytellers. 2, decision making and communication are based on good reasons. 3, good reasons are determined by matters of history, biography, culture, and character. 4, rationality is based in people's awareness of internal consistency and resemblance to lived experience. And 5, we experience a world that is filled with stories and we must choose among them. So that is the paradigm that I operate under. That's the one that I believe. Although I will say that within that, I believe that applies to everybody. That's why I believe it. I think that's how people actually experience the world and process things, is in more or less terms of a story. And then I believe that there is a true story among all the stories, and personally, my own belief is that that is the story of Jesus Christ in the Bible. So, that's the narrative paradigm, and that's narrative theory. But I'm going to get into how does that apply to Jews and what's going on there. So before I get to that point, I have to say that, and this is kind of like what my book is about, is that everybody's life is like a story where they're the main character. And maybe you've thought this before, maybe it's not that obvious, but it gets more complicated. But the main structure of somebody's life, or of a story in general, is a story arc. So a story arc, it starts at the beginning, and it has a middle, and it has an end. And like the name implies, it kind of follows a curve. And so the beginning, it's setting, characters, and then in the middle it's conflict, rising action, and then at the peak of the story is the climax, and then at the end there is sometimes they say falling action and resolution. So everybody has a story basically, and it follows this over their entire life, and people kind of know this and think about this at various points in their lives, but there's all these other stories going on as well. And what I think of and what I believe is that we're the main character in our own story, but everybody else is the main character in their own story, and we're all kind of like connected through story in a sense. And those arcs, they all fit together, but they don't really form like a big arc. They form a spiral. That's what I think of it. It's a spiral. And the spiral of your life, it either spirals away from God, that's what I believe, or it spirals toward God. How does it spiral away or toward? Through love, and that's the connectedness with other people's stories, right? Or it spirals away through selfishness, essentially. There's other things, other terms, like cupidity is a good one. It's kind of the desire for more endlessly, and it's another way of saying selfishness. But how does it spiral toward God? Well, self-sacrifice, that's a huge one as well. Jesus, what did he do? He sacrificed himself on the cross for our sins to return us to God. Or so that we could be returned to God, if we accept him, have faith in him, and follow his commandments. And so that's what I think. And also, while I'm here, I would go further and say actually that I think that we die, obviously, from dust to dust. We're born and then we live and we die. But I think that we have a soul that lives forever, or could go to hell forever. And living forever would be reuniting with God. Going to hell or being in hell would be eternal separation. So that's what I believe. And necessarily, and it's hard for me to really wrap my head around this, but God is eternal. So I believe that God actually is eternal. So you return to God, and then you are with God forever. That's the kind of hard concept to even understand personally, because I haven't really thought like that too much, and it's hard to even have the conversation with anybody because I think barely anybody can think like that. people are afraid of death. People are afraid of their own death. Sometimes I'm not even that afraid of death. Not in like a suicidal way, but if you watch war movies or war documentaries, or if you've read books, like a good book is The Wars by forget who wrote it. Timothy Findley, The Wars. That's a good book, but there's a lot of good books and things about war and fighting and dying, and fighting and dying for what you believe in, and then there's always like a spin on it, whether it was something different when they actually did die and they realize it at the end that but or that they were fighting for, but I kind of I don't know, like I think about it sometimes and I'm just like, sometimes it doesn't really scare me as much. Like, actually, death doesn't scare me that much for some reason. And I think that we should be afraid of God. You're actually supposed to love and fear God. But, yeah, so. Now, how does it apply to Jews? Okay, so I was listening to the podcast. Jake Shields was talking to some guy with like a Hispanic last name, I forget. But this guy was talking about the Talmud. So he's some guy that I don't know really much about him, and I didn't listen to the whole thing. I just listened to parts. But he was saying that he researched the Talmud a lot, and he said he was making some interesting points, and he was saying that Jews are like, they're essentially masters of narrative and of stories, kind of, and like manipulating them. And he was saying that they have like an inverted morality. And it was interesting. I didn't really think about the morality part before, but I had thought about the inverted part. And I'll go more into this. Okay, so I was reading Jesus in the Talmud by Peter Schaeffer. Essential book for any Christian, I believe. It's an essential book. It talks about Jesus as he's written about in the Talmud. So Jesus was considered by the Jews to be like one of their primary enemies in history. They have other arch enemies. Titus is one. He destroyed the second temple. For some reason, Balaam is one of their main enemies, and it doesn't make a ton of sense to me, because in the story in the Old Testament, Balaam actually blesses the Jews when he's supposed to. Somebody else, I think a Moabite, wants him to curse the Israelites, but he prays about it, and then God keeps telling him to bless the Jews, so he does, or he blessed the Israelites. And then another like arch enemy of the Jewish people, if it's not Jesus, Balaam, and Titus, Hitler is another one. And so the story part of this is very interesting with all of them. Okay, why is it interesting? Because these are the main stories almost of the entire world. Not the entire world, because other countries do see these things somewhat differently or have their own faith systems, belief systems, and things that they believe about World War II and about earlier history. But at least for the Western world, these things are like so deeply intertwined in everything. They're almost like what things flow out of. And it is, I think, true that Jewish people have essentially written the narrative that everybody else follows. And I learned about this a little bit, and it's actually a magic thing. Like, it's evil magic. So I'll be careful when I talk about this, but it is evil. And I rebuke it in the name of Jesus Christ. But it is this magic that they practice. I think it's Jewish mysticism or Kabbalism or something, but it's Lemefrea, and it is that's Lemefrea, and it is inverting things. So they take something and they invert it. And sometimes that would even be a word. But this is sort of like a spell casting thing. And legitimately, these spells, I believe, have been cast on people. And this is why things are so inverted and turned around. If you trace them back to their origin, you'll see why. So, yeah. So, and it legitimately is confusing to think about. Okay, so I gave an example before, but that is of parthenogenesis, and then that's what Christians believe about Jesus came from the virgin birth. It's called parthenogenesis, and the writers of the Talmud, the rabbis, they denied that, and they said that he was the son of he was the illegitimate son of a Roman soldier named Pantera. So they took Partheno and they made it Pantera. So they did sort of an inversion on the name, and that's one of a word. But other words that some of them that have been like a lot of stuff has been invented too, and again, people do not even seem to realize this. But Judeo-Christian, that's an invented term. Anti-Semitism, that's another invented term. And, like I study this stuff. You can study it yourself too, but if you look at, whenever you look up a word or a term or try to define something, even through a Google search, it'll show you how often that term has been used over what time period. A lot of these terms, they just pop up more recently. And that's because they're part of narrative control. So they are part of the stories that get propagated to the public. And everything is so confusing, honestly, in the world, just from, the standpoint of almost anybody, that it kind of doesn't make sense. It's just like a bunch of stuff going on. And a lot of people just kind of go with what's going on and what's said, if it seems like it's coming from a place of authority. And so other terms like racism as well, that's not invented, but that one has been used as a cudgel, certainly, especially on white people. A lot of these terms, they are used to essentially guilt and shame white people, and the purpose for this is to destroy white Western countries. Now, I think it's a little bit late to the game to be saying this as if it were something that was new. This is kind of known at this point, I think, by a lot of people. But what's going on now is initially it was kind of called a conspiracy, but now it's so apparent that it's basically changing to it's a good thing. So first it's like, oh, wasn't not happening, you're crazy, that's a conspiracy. And now it's like, oh, it's happening, but it's a good thing. And we need a less white world and everything like that. And yeah, I don't agree with that. The total population of white people has shrunk from 36% in the world. I'm not really sure when, maybe like 100 years ago, but it's now 8%, and it's projected to go down to 5%, I think, by 2050. And yeah, it's not a good thing, but the purpose of it is actually because Christianity is an enemy to the Jewish people. So yeah, that's why it's essentially illegal. It's not illegal, but it's something. These are things you cannot talk about essentially with most people because they don't want to hear it. Because it's almost like a spell has been cast. It's like you can't really say these things because people will distance themselves from you. You'll lose your job. You will be censored. You will, in some cases, go to jail. People do for hate speech, quote unquote. But yeah, so it's actually very serious. And the reason why it's so serious is because it can rally people together towards something. And, you know, I believe that Jews work for the devil. And the reason I believe that is because Jesus says that, tells us that they are the children of the devil in John 8, verse 40 something. He tells us that. But again, the reason is complex, and it's really a spiritual reason. It's because the Jewish people believe that they are God's chosen people. They see other people as not really as people, as inferior or cattle or beasts or something less than Jewish people. And you know, there's a term, goyim, and the other thing is that Jesus, you know, they call him a heretic and a sorcerer. And it's because they say he's an idolater too, because he says that he is God. Like he is God, so he claimed that. And when he was arguing with the Pharisees, much of the Bible, a lot of it is, or the New Testament, is basically like, a lot of it is Jesus arguing against the Pharisees and proving them wrong as well. And the arguments are there and they're sound. One of them was the Jews were saying to him, "Who are you that you should tell us the law when we have the law from our father Abraham? And we got the law from Abraham and from Moses, which God gave it to them. So who are you to tell us that you have the law?" And Jesus says to them, "Very truly I tell you, before Abraham was, I am." And in other translations he says, "Before Abraham was, I was." And so, but he's saying the same thing essentially. He's saying that he is God, because that's the identity of God, is I am that I am, or I am who I am. Yahweh, the Tetragrammaton, the burning bush. And so if you put that together, that's what perichoresis means. Perichoresis is a mutual indwelling of the Holy Trinity. Jesus is God, and he is, I'm not 100% sure on the inter-Trinitarian descriptions, but he is God, but there's a mutual indwelling that they dwell together. And so from the beginning, Jesus was there in the beginning. He's the one who gave the law to Abraham and to Moses. Or he made the covenant with Abraham and gave the law to Moses. And the Jews, you know, God's chosen people, the Israelites, they strayed away from that. And Jesus came and he was rebuking them all throughout the New Testament. And basically they keep saying, you know, no, we haven't strayed from God. You're a heretic. And that's pretty much the same Jews as today. Speaking at least from a theological standpoint, the Pharisees and the Sadducees, they made the Talmud. They made the Talmud after Jesus died, after their temple got destroyed by Titus. And they've basically been kicked out of like all these different countries throughout you know, the year of our Lord AD, after the year 0 or year 1, through the last 2,000 years, they've been expelled from many, many, many different countries. And now they have their own state, the Jewish state, but yeah, it gets very complicated, but they do hate Christians, and yeah, they're very good at narrative control. And part of the reason why they've been expelled from so many different countries, so eventually Christianity became the religion of much of the world, much of Europe, and people started to read what was in the Talmud. So the Talmud came around, and that's like it's a collection of books. They call it the Ocean of the Talmud. It's huge. I just heard it's like 6,000 pages total, but I'm sure there's a lot there. But it's basically like all the responses to the Old Testament from the rabbis about how to interpret all the 613 laws that are given in the Old Testament. A lot of it is talking about how, it gives a lot of different reasons or commentaries on how to, the differences between a Jew and a non-Jew and all these different things. But it also says these things about Jesus, that he's burning in hell in boiling excrement and so on. It has a narrative there about him. It's actually an inverted narrative. Peter Schaeffer says that, who wrote Jesus in the Talmud, he says that he speculates, but he thinks that the reason they wrote it that way was because Jesus said to the Jews that you don't need to wash your hands. What is important is what comes out of your mouth, not what goes into it. You don't need to wash your hands when you're eating the I think the offering. I'm not 100% sure, but he was telling them it's more important what comes out of your mouth. And then he was also saying, take this, eat of it. It is my body, and then take this, drink. It is my blood. And he was saying that you will live forever. This is the Holy Communion. And the Jews put like an inverted punishment, saying that, well, actually, you're going to be boiling in excrement instead of all this about what comes out of your mouth. You're putting all this into your mouth. And they were just basically trying to blaspheme him in an extreme inverted polemical way. And they did the same thing with Titus and Balaam as well, actually. Titus, he was, I think, ground to dust, or he was burned to ashes because he burned the temple and destroyed the temple. So he was burned to ashes, and it was just, he would get cast and spread out over the whole world, and then he would be formed together to burn to ashes again, and just for eternity or something like that. Or I think it might have been, I don't even know if it was for eternity for him, but for Jesus it was. And then for Balaam, he was supposed to sit in boiling semen, I think. And it was something to do with fornication, I believe. But, yeah. So these are the things that are in the Talmud. And I would just say that these things really do have, like, all of these things that people believe really do have an effect on what people do. That's my point. And for a lot of people, they just kind of are very skeptical. They're agnostic or skeptical or atheist or something like that. Or there's just too much. Or things are so conflicting and contradicting that they can't even really make up their mind. And they just kind of default to a position of, well, just be kind, or just don't be a dick, or don't hurt anybody and it's okay. Um, but yeah, so I just wanted to talk about that, really, about narrative theory, and just how everybody's life is like a story. We see our lives, we kind of like think about the world in terms of a story. And we think of the future in terms of a story as well. And we also think of how we'll feel in the future as well when something happens or if something happens. It's kind of what keeps us going a lot of the time. But yeah, I think that there is a true story, and that's the story of Jesus Christ in the Bible. So yeah, that's why I worship Jesus, and I glorify Him, I praise Him, and also I praise the Father Almighty and the Holy Spirit as well. So, mm-hmm. I will say also that I also take consciousness into account. I'm kind of talking here about this book idea that I've been trying to write, but I took the idea, or I borrowed the idea, or I was inspired by the idea by David Hawkins, The Map of Consciousness. And a lot of people talk about this too now, about that consciousness is fundamental. And to me this makes perfect sense, honestly, because it's kind of the question about like, how is anything going on? Like, how do we experience anything? And I thought about this a lot more when I came across the work of Donald Hoffman, and he had like the interface theory. And interface theory, he was saying that, well, you know, our perceptions, our sight, our sound, taste, touch, smell, these things are really just like, and what we, interact with in the world, it's really just like the desktop on a computer. It's like the monitor. It's like a screen. It's not actually what's going on. It's like if you click your mouse around on a screen and you're clicking on icons in the screen and you're opening stuff up, or on your phone you're scrolling TikTok or you're scrolling YouTube and you're tapping on videos and you're clicking like and you're typing in comments and stuff. That's not the phone, that's not the computer. That's just the interface, that's the screen, right? It's not the code, it's not the hardwired circuits. It's just the interface. So that's the same thing about our perceptions, really, that they're the interface, but they're not really true reality or what is true. And the reason he said this is because, he ran experiments and he came to the results and the conclusion that if we evolved in order to fit our environment, to have fitness, and to reproduce, in his experiments, his simulations, it showed that we would never evolve to perceive the truth because we don't need it. We just need to fit the environment, perceive that an apple is red, so we evolve to see red really well, and we can pick fruit, and we need to evolve to see that a mate is attractive. We need to evolve to see that something is dangerous. We need to evolve to see that something will be beneficial to us. And so that's kind of what we evolved for. That's the thing. And so that made me really think, like, well, then we don't really know everything that we kind of think that we know. And he was talking about consciousness, like what is consciousness. And so I also, around the same time actually, I came across the Map of Consciousness by David R. Hawkins, and that talks more about, it's from his book Power versus Force, and that talks more about like states of being, really. They're conscious states, but how your world and what you perceive changes depending on what state you're in. And a state of consciousness can be something from very low consciousness, which is like shame, fear, anxiety, anger. These are lower states of consciousness, which he says are in the force realm. You're using force at that point. And a higher states of higher states of consciousness are anything above courage. So courage is where it starts, really, and then it can rise from there through, I think, neutrality, reason, and you get into things like love, joy, peace, and the highest one is enlightenment, which they talk about in many different faith and belief systems, like Buddhism and everything. But it it really stuck out to me, this book. And I've also kind of been wondering as well about these different things and trying to put them together. So this is kind of how I came to make this connection between the Map of Consciousness and narrative theory, really. And then now I've been supporting it with Hoffman's interface theory and other theories as well. And the reason I do all this stuff is because actually life is really complicated when you start thinking about things. It doesn't have to be, well, it can be less complicated, but if you think about things a lot, it can be very complicated. Let's just put it that way. And that's why it's also good to do things. You should not just think about things. You actually, doing things is important too. And it's actually very important. And so I've actually thought about it, about the top level, of consciousness, which is enlightenment. I've thought about it, and I used to think about it quite a bit before, and obviously you would think, like, well, how do I get there? A lot of people tell you through meditation, but on the Map of Consciousness, attached to it is an identity, what your identity is when you're at those different levels. And the identity of an enlightened person is just I am, or is, sorry. The identity is. And apparently this is, and the way that's supposed to feel is ineffable. You can't describe it. But apparently this is the identity of God. And not really sure. I'm careful when I talk about this stuff as well. But when I read it in the Bible, it kind of does add up somewhat. At least from like a very, from human understanding, and I humble myself before God and I exalt God. I'm not trying to exalt myself, but because God actually gives us his identity in the Old Testament. What I was trying to talk about is that he says, I am that I am, or I am who I am. And this is also how we know that Jesus is God. One of the ways is that he says, before Abraham was, I am. So it's talking about is, and it's talking about presence, all these different meditation faith systems like The Power of Now by Eckhart Tolle. He talks about presence, and he claims that he's, or I don't know if he claims or other people claim that he's enlightened. But he talks about presence basically and being in the now. And so I think that there is I'm hesitant to say that there's truth and wisdom in a lot of these different things, because I don't really want to fall into perennialism. Perennialism is that there's just like everything points to one God. Is a lot of people talk about this, but I don't believe in that. And the reason, I'll tell you why, is because Jesus tells us that I am the way, the truth, and the life, and nobody comes to the Father except for through me. So that's why I'm a Christian. And in large part, really. And Jesus, if you really think about Jesus and you pray to Jesus, you meditate and you ask for Jesus to reveal himself to you, you get like a feeling, it's like a glow in your heart, or like it feels like a connection to God. Like it feels like love, really. And I will say, when I pray, and I'm just going to be very careful about saying this, I found a very powerful prayer before, and it was from the diary of Faustina Kowalska, or it was from the Chaplet of the Divine Mercy, which I think she wrote. And she prays a very powerful prayer in there. She says, O Holy One, O Mighty One, O Holy Eternal One, O Holy Immortal One, O Holy Mighty One. So she's praying, I believe, to God directly. And sometimes when I pray that prayer, it is so powerful, seriously, because it's calling directly. I think it might be calling directly on God. And, these things are really powerful. And that's why I think people really need to be careful when they are constantly blaspheming without really knowing it, maybe. Taking the Lord's name in vain. I used to do that, but I regret it, and I ask for mercy about that, because I didn't really take it seriously before. I didn't really understand it, So, I wanted to touch on, so I was reading this post by somebody on the Actualized forum, and again, I'm careful when I look up this stuff about actualized.org and Leo Gura, because I think he's trying to incorporate evil as well. Like he talks down to Christians, but on that forum, somebody was talking about the map of consciousness, and they were talking about the different levels of consciousness, and they were talking about people, or what was where on different levels of the map of consciousness, and like what different teachings and everything. And at the highest levels, although there was one higher, which was not actually an earthly level, the higher one, or an earthly being, it was the highest one was archangels, but Jesus and Krishna, I think, and Buddha were at the highest level for the nervous system of an organism on Earth, that a human nervous system could sustain, which was like the enlightenment level. And I think about stuff like this, and when I think about other stuff like this, the thing that the reason that I remain a Christian is because of or the reason that I am a Christian is because of Jesus says, I am the way, the truth, and the life. Nobody comes to the Father except for through me. So I think about that, and yeah, and also when I pray, and I felt before the love of Jesus as well. So that's why I'm a Christian. But also I'm still learning, I'm still growing in my faith, so yeah. So yeah, very powerful stuff. Very powerful stuff. Seriously. Very powerful stuff, but also important stuff, because the stuff on earth, that we can chase around, it will all pass away. It will all fade away one day. And yeah, I believe that I believe that God is eternal, so that's really the point, is to return to God. So yeah, okay. All right, well, that is all.